Today we are going to be looking at parallel versus perpendicular lines. So first we'll look at what parallel lines are and what perpendicular lines are. So parallel are two lines that run side by side but never touch. So you can think of here the L's in parallel, they never touch. So parallel lines will run side by side and never touch. Whereas if you have a perpendicular lines, these are lines that do, but they don't just cross anyway, they cross at 90 degrees. So when you think about perpendicular, they're going to cross at exactly 90 degrees. Let's see if I can get it good here. So it'll look like an X, it could look like a T, but it has to have that 90 degrees. So if they're just kind of like this, where they're don't have that 90, these are not perpendicular, because those are not 90 degrees. So with parallel lines, you can see it with the pictures, how it's two lines that never cross, but you can also tell by their equations. So if we have an equation that is y equals 3x minus 4, a parallel line could be an equation that is y equals 3x plus 2. So if you notice here, there's something that is similar about these equations. These two lines have the same slope. Parallel lines will always have the same slope. If their slopes are not the same, the lines are not parallel. If we think about perpendicular, one line might be y equals 4x plus 5, whereas a perpendicular line to this first one would be y equals negative 1/4 x plus 4. So for these slopes, here a slope of 4, here we have a slope of negative 1/4. So for these slopes are something called, slopes are opposite reciprocals. So what an opposite reciprocal is it's an opposite sign. So opposite would mean it goes from positive to negative, and a reciprocal is a flipped fraction. So here we go from 4, and when we flip 4, we get 1/4. Another example of a reciprocal would be 3/4 and 4/3. The top and bottom flip places. So for perpendicular, the slopes are opposite reciprocals. Opposite goes positive to negative, or it could be negative to positive, and the reciprocal is the flipped fraction. We'll look at another example if you're still a little confused. So let's take a look at some equations. So for example 1, we want a line that has a y-intercept of 0, 2, and is parallel to the equation y equals, that's not the right equation, 3x minus y equals 14. So if you remember, our equations from the beginning all started with y equals, y equals, y equals. But if I look at this one, this does not start with y equals. So I need to change this equation to where it says y equals so I can find my slope. So to do that, I'm going to take over the x. So 3x minus 3x goes away. I'll do minus 3x on the other side. Bring down here, I'll get negative y equals, and then I have negative 3x plus 14, and then I still have my negative. So I need to divide by negative 1. Divide by negative 1. Divide by negative 1. So for my final equation, I will get y equals 3x minus 14. So this is the original, but I want a new parallel line. So it's going to be y equals slope x plus the y-intercept. So I need the slope and the y-intercept. So if I look in the question here, it says the y-intercept is 2. So I can take that 2 and plug it into my equation. And now I need the slope. So if I have parallel lines, I want my slope to be the same as my original. So here, my slope is 3. So in my new equation, my slope will still be 3. So for our final answer, we would have y equals 3x plus 2. These two lines are parallel because they both have a slope of 3. All right, we're going to look at one more. This time, I want a line that has a y-intercept of 0, negative 4, and is perpendicular to y equals 5x plus 2. So if I look here, this already says y equals, so I'm good with this equation. I do not need to change it. But for my new perpendicular line, I need again a y equals blank x plus blank. So this is my slope and this is my y-intercept. So if I look in the question, it says the y-intercept of negative 4. So here I can plug in negative 4. And that's all I do for the y-intercept. But now I also need the slope. So I want one that is perpendicular to this equation, y equals 5x plus 2. So here the slope is 5. So for my new slope, I want it to be an opposite reciprocal. So opposite means this 5 is positive, so my new slope will be negative. And reciprocal means I'm going to take the 5 and flip the fraction. So if I have a whole number for the slope, when I flip that fraction, I'm going to put the 5 on bottom, and then I just put a 1 on top. Anytime it's a whole number, it's always going to be a 1 on top. So for my new slope, I would have negative 1 over 5. So for my final answer, I'm going to end up with y equals negative 1 over 5x. And then here, when I have this plus a negative, I can just put minus 4. And now I'm done. So now you'll have a practice with parallel and perpendicular. So go back to Google Classroom and look for the practice for parallel and perpendicular.